Hey, 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 welcome to AAA Wednesday, which is my weekly Q&A session where I'm responding to questions you've left me in the comments about the publishing industry and writing a better book. And if you're wondering what that brown blob is behind me, that is my dog, Luca, who has decided to join us today. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping before we dive into the excellent questions on deck today. Number one, if you're new here, welcome. In addition to these weekly Q&A sessions, every week I also publish videos either with a deep dive into a specific topic related to writing, or I talk about the publishing industry as I used to work in the traditional publishing industry, and I like to bring all my insights from that to all of my viewers. So if any of that interests you, please go ahead and join us by subscribing. Second piece of housekeeping, it's a super small thing, but if you can just hit that thumbs up button, it really does a lot to help my videos reach more viewers just like you, and I'd really appreciate it. So let's dive into the first question today. That embarrassing moment when you finally have a question to ask Alyssa, so you type it out before you even hit play, and then it ends up being the first question in the video. This is referring to a video from a couple weeks ago where I talked about if self-published books could be comps. So I'm glad your question got answered. I guess the only follow-up question I have would be, say you have a traditionally published comp title, but it's a new mid-list traditionally published comp title, and you're not sure if it's selling well. How can you find out? This is a good question. You might have found a traditionally published title that looks like a great comp for your book, but you can't really tell if it sold well and therefore should be used as a comp, because typically you want your comps to have some solid sales, because A, that means it's more likely that the agent is going to recognize it without having to look it up, but also B, and more importantly, it's showing the agent that there's reader appetite for your type of story. If you comp your book to two books that didn't sell well at all, you're just kind of telling the agent that your book maybe is not going to sell well as well, right? So you want comps to have solid or significant sales, so you're showing that people are gravitating to this type of story. But if you're an author, you don't really typically have access to book sales data, as that's only accessible by people who work in the industry. So how can you guesstimate if something has significant sales? There's a couple of methods that I personally use. The first is to check the number of Goodreads and Amazon reviews. If the book has a couple thousand reviews on Amazon and or on Goodreads, I consider that a pretty good indicator that it has sold somewhat solidly. After all, not everyone who bought the book is going to leave a review, so you at least have a few thousand sales there, right? That's kind of the benchmark that I like to use for comps. Something else that I look at though is if the comp title has a lot of strong press and or any bestseller status. So you can typically see this if you go to the Amazon description of the book. If it had a starred review in Publishers Weekly, or if it reached USA Today's bestseller list, they'll typically put that in the actual description of the book, so you can check that. And if it has some kind of distinction like this that's recognized in the industry, then it is typically also a good comp to use, because clearly it's gotten enough attention and sales to get that distinction. If it's the case that the book just got published, then I might hold off on using it as a comp until it's been a few months and you're able to see how well it has sold. However, again, if you go to the page and it already has all these distinctions for it, which books can get, right on publication, then I'd go ahead and use it, because that indicates it is a bit of a buzzy book that might actually be on the top of agents' radar as you are querying. Before we get into the next question, I wanted to let you know about a free resource I created specially for my YouTube community. It is called my Story Self-Assessment Worksheet, and it's a fun, easy quiz designed to help you answer questions about your book and gauge your confidence level in certain elements of it. It'll help you pinpoint the areas that you feel are weaker and the areas that you feel are stronger, so you can return to your manuscript with that in mind and hopefully make those weaker sections just as strong. Downloading that's going to opt you into my newsletter, Chapter Break, where I publish exclusive interviews with publishing industry insiders and successfully published authors. I'm getting so much amazing feedback from many of you directly that I'm really appreciating. I'm so glad you're enjoying the people who are being featured, and I'm so glad you get to get their insights as well. If you want to go straight to the newsletter, the link is also in the description. Here's the next question, and it's actually more about the structure of my AAA Wednesdays, which I appreciate. Hi, Alyssa. Do you only pull questions for your AAA Wednesdays from the most recent previous video, or do you compile questions to answer from additional previous videos? I'm wondering if I should do a rewrite in for a question asked several videos ago, since it has not been covered, or if it is possibly a question you will eventually be able to respond to. So when I sit down to record these videos, typically I will pull up the last AAA video that I haven't yet gone through the comments for. And then I will go through all the comments for that video. And then once I exhaust the comments from that video, I'll move on to the next one. So I'll kind of work linearly through the videos that way. But I totally understand that I'm not necessarily catching questions if someone's coming back to that video after I've already gone through the comments once for it before. So the bottom line is, if I haven't answered your question, please feel free to just paste it in again in another video. I have no problem with you repeating questions. I'm also open to shaking up the structure of how I go through them. That's just what I found to be the easiest and allows me to kind of track which questions I've already looked at and which ones I haven't yet. So really appreciate you asking. We have time for one more question today. I've lately realized that I'm not a very strict plotter, but something more in between the two polar ends, plotter/pantser. As a result, my productivity got much higher after I stopped plotting out every single bit of the story. Now I only need to know enough to get myself creatively going as I traverse from story beat to story beat. How would you recommend newer authors find their own ratios of plotting versus pantsing? We can talk about the pros and cons of plotting and the pros and cons of pantsing all day long if we want to, but the bottom line is, do the method that works for you. I'm so glad that you have found a method that works for your process, which sounds like doing a loose outline and then allowing yourself the creative freedom to get from one point beat to the other. It's amazing that that works for you and that gives you the creative energy you need to write. But everyone is different. Some authors write with absolutely no outline, and if that works for them, even if they're a new author, I'm gonna say go full force, do it. Do whatever gets the story on the page. If that requires an extremely detailed outline, maybe even an Excel file and files of character profiles, etc., then by all means do that too. Every author works differently, and there's truly no right way to write. There are probably plenty of authors who fall somewhere in between and incorporate elements of both plotting and pantsing in their own process. So I'd actually love if anyone wants to share in the comments what their process is. Do you fall squarely as a plotter or a pantser or somewhere in between? And also, how did you find your own writing process? Every single one is valid, and I'm never going to tell an author that they should write in one specific way, because truly every author's creative brain works differently. I hope you enjoyed the questions today. If you have something you'd like to ask, drop it in the comments here, as I mentioned, and that will be added to my queue for my future session. And again, if you have an old question that I never answered, feel free to paste it in again. Before you head out, if you are enjoying these sessions, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button to help out my channel. Hit that subscribe button if you want to join our amazing community. And don't forget your free story self-assessment worksheet and my newsletter link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.